The first time my sister held up my wedding dress, she cried like it was her own. Not a quiet, sentimental sniffle either, full-on shaking shoulders, hand over mouth, mascara threatening to slide. She kept whispering, "This is it. This is the moment." Like she'd just watched a miracle unfold. Everyone in the boutique thought it was sweet. The seamstress even smiled at us with that knowing look women give each other, as if we were sharing a sacred sisterhood. But I remember the way my sister's fingers clutched the lace, too tight, too possessive, like she wasn't just holding a dress, like she was claiming it. I didn't notice it then. I was too busy trying not to faint. Too busy staring at my reflection and imagining walking down the aisle to the sound of our family breathing all at once. Too busy thinking this was finally my turn, because for once, it really felt like the universe had chosen me. And I let my sister plan everything. That's the part people shake their heads at now. They ask it like it's a riddle with an obvious answer. Why would you let her? But you have to understand who Mara was in our family, who she'd trained us to believe she was. Mara was the organized one, the charming one, the one who remembered everyone's birthday and sent the perfect gift with a handwritten card that made people tear up. Mara could walk into a room and somehow the lights seemed to angle themselves toward her. She wasn't loud, she was magnetic, like a candle flame that didn't need to shout to make you stare. And I was, the leftover, not in a tragic way, just in the way some families have a star and then everyone else learns how to orbit without crashing into them. Mara was the star. I was the quiet little planet that kept its head down and stayed grateful for scraps of warmth. When I got engaged, my mother squealed so loudly my neighbor texted to ask if everything was okay. My dad hugged me in that awkward way he always had, like he was proud but afraid to break something. And Mara kissed my cheek and said, "Finally, finally," like she'd been waiting for this chapter to begin. Ethan proposed on a cold evening in November, right outside the cafe where we had our first date. The string lights above us blinked in that soft, romantic way that makes every photo look like a movie still. He knelt down, his hands trembling, and opened a little velvet box. The ring caught the light like it had been designed specifically to stun the world into silence. I remember the warmth of his smile, the way his eyes looked at me like I was the answer he'd searched for his entire life. And I said yes. I thought that yes meant something permanent, something protected. Like once you said it, the world had to respect it. That was my first mistake. A week after the proposal, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and a pen, trying to list ideas for a wedding that felt like us. I wrote things like candles, small jazz band, white roses, grandmother's pearls, late-night coffee bar. My handwriting was messy, excited. Then Mara arrived with a planner binder the size of a small suitcase. "I'm doing this," she announced, sliding it onto the table with a thud that made my pen jump. "You're going to enjoy being a bride. You're not going to stress. I know exactly what to do." I laughed, half embarrassed. "Mara, no, listen." She leaned forward and tapped the binder like it was holy scripture. "I already called 3 venues. I booked us a consultation with the best florist in the city. I found a photographer who does that dreamy film style you love. And I know a caterer who does those tiny lemon tarts you're obsessed with." My mouth fell open. "How did you?" Mara shrugged, all casual grace. "I know you. And I love you. Let me do this." My mother adored the idea, of course. "It'll be perfect," she chirped over the phone. "Mara has such taste." My dad simply said, "If it makes things easier, honey." And Ethan kissed my forehead and said, "Your sister's amazing. We're lucky to have her. Lucky." So I let her. I handed her control like a gift, like proof I trusted her. And for a while it was perfect. Mara chose a venue by the lake where the trees leaned over the water like they were eavesdropping. She picked a soft ivory palette that made everything feel warm and clean. She found a string quartet that played modern songs in classical arrangements, Ethan's idea, but Mara made it happen. She even tracked down a baker who could replicate the exact vanilla almond cake my grandmother used to make before she passed. Each time she presented an idea, she watched my face closely. "You like it?" she'd ask. And I'd nod, heart swelling, because how could I not? It was like she was building my dream with her bare hands. But there were little things, little moments that felt like a needle pricking a balloon, so tiny you could convince yourself it was nothing, until you looked up and realized the air was slowly leaking out. Like the way Mara always asked Ethan for his opinion first. "What do you think, Ethan?" she'd say, eyes shining, pen poised. "Do you prefer the linen napkins or the embroidered ones?" Sometimes I'd answer, but my voice would land softly, like a bird hitting a window. Or the way she'd text him separately. I'd see his phone light up while we watched movies, Mara's name on the screen, and he'd glance at it like it was normal, like it didn't matter. "What's that?" I'd ask lightly. "Wedding stuff," he'd say, and kiss my temple, and my question would dissolve. Then there was the dress. Mara insisted on coming to every fitting. She insisted on being the one to adjust the veil. She insisted on being the one to zip it up, and every time she did I felt something strange, like she was sealing me into a costume. One afternoon after my third fitting, I went to the bathroom and caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked beautiful, but my eyes were wide in a way that didn't match the dress, wide like a deer that had heard something move in the woods. In the hallway outside, I heard Mara's laughter with the seamstress. "I told you she'd look like a doll," she said, voice bright. "A doll. Not a bride, not a woman in love. A doll." That night I stood at my window and watched the street lamps glow. The engagement ring felt heavy on my finger. I turned it slowly, watching the stone catch the light. I tried to tell myself I was being dramatic. I tried to tell myself I was lucky. But my stomach wouldn't unclench. The week of the wedding arrived in a blur of appointments and deliveries, boxes of favors stacked in my living room, flowers arriving in coolers. My phone buzzing non-stop with confirmation calls. Mara had taken over my life like an efficient storm. On Tuesday, she called me at work. "I need you to come with me," she said. "Where?" I asked, already anxious. "To meet the efficient. Ethan's coming too." That word again. Too. We met at the venue's little office by the lake. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. The efficient was a kind older woman with silver hair and a calming voice. She asked us questions about our love story, our vows, our hopes. But Mara answered more than I did. "She wants something romantic, but not cheesy," Mara said, smiling as if she were speaking for me. "Ethan doesn't like too much attention, so keep it intimate. She's emotional, so maybe she?" The efficient asked gently, looking at me. I swallowed. I can talk," I said. Mara's smile twitched, like the corner of a curtain caught in wind. Then she laughed softly. "Of course you can. I'm just helping." Helping. After the meeting, Ethan walked ahead toward the parking lot, taking a call. Mara lingered beside me, her heels sinking slightly into the gravel. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just overwhelmed." Mara tilted her head. The lake behind her was calm, glassy. Her eyes were the same dark brown as mine, but where mine looked tired, hers looked bright. Alive. "You've always been overwhelmed," she said softly, almost affectionate. "That's why you need me." I forced a smile. "I don't need you." The air shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. Mara's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes cooled. "Oh," she said. "Right." And then she smiled again, sweet, practiced. "Come on, we have a million things to do." That night I found the wedding binder on my kitchen counter. Mara must have left it there after dropping off seating chart drafts. I wasn't trying to snoop, honestly. I just wanted to confirm the schedule for the rehearsal dinner. I flipped it open. The pages were perfectly tabbed, color-coded. my name printed on the cover in elegant script, Lena and Ethan. But when I turned to the section labeled vows, my breath snagged. There were notes in Mara's handwriting, neat, slanted, confident, not just suggestions, full sentences. A speech, lines underlined with hearts and stars. And in the margin, circled in bold ink, he needs to say it like he means it, like he chose me. Not her. But my hand still froze. Because in that moment, standing alone in my kitchen with the binder open like a mouth, I realized something horrifying. Mara wasn't planning my wedding like a loving sister. Mara was planning it like a takeover. And somewhere between the lace, the lake, and the binder full of her handwriting, my wedding had stopped belonging to me. I closed the binder slowly, like it might bite, and I didn't know yet that the worst was still coming. Because the next time Mara smiled at me, it wouldn't be sweet. It would be sharp, and she would say the sentence that would split my life in half. The morning after I found the binder, I woke up with my jaw clenched so tight my head ached. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, pale and harmless, like it didn't know what it was shining on. Ethan was still asleep beside me, his breathing slow, steady, peaceful, in a way that felt almost insulting. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying that circled word in my mind. Me. I told myself I was overreacting. That Mara's handwriting was just sloppy. That she'd meant me as in the bride. That I was exhausted, stressed, letting old childhood insecurities crawl back to the surface where they didn't belong. But doubt is a parasite. Once it gets in, it doesn't leave quietly. At breakfast, Ethan kissed my cheek and asked if I wanted coffee or tea. I watched his hands as he poured the coffee, the same hands that used to make me feel safe just by being near. Nothing about him looked different. Nothing about his voice sounded guilty. "You okay?" he asked, noticing my silence. "Yeah," I said too quickly. "Just wedding brain." He smiled. "Almost there. Almost there." The words landed like a warning instead of a promise. Mara arrived an hour later with a garment bag slung over her arm and her phone already pressed to her ear. She didn't knock. She never did. She moved through my apartment like it was an extension of herself, shoes clicking, perfume filling the air. "Yes, confirm the delivery time," she said into the phone, then held up a finger at me, signaling 1 second. "No, not the back entrance. I want everything seen. It matters. Seen." She hung up and turned to me, all brightness again. "Good morning, bride." I watched her closely now. The way her eyes flicked to Ethan before returning to me. The way her smile sharpened when he smiled back. "I brought your rehearsal dress," she said, lifting the garment bag, "and I need you to come with me later." "There's an issue." My stomach tightened. "What kind of issue?" She waved a hand. "Nothing you need to stress about. I'll handle it. I always do." That word again. Handle. We went through the day like actors hitting their marks. Calls. Checklists. Timelines. Mara directed. I followed. Ethan floated between us, agreeable, trusting, unaware, or pretending to be. By afternoon, Mara announced she needed to borrow Ethan for a quick errand. "It's wedding-related," she said, already reaching for her keys. "Don't worry. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I'll come too." But my voice stayed buried under years of letting Mara lead. "Okay," I said. They left together. The apartment felt too quiet without them. I tried to distract myself by folding favors, tiny boxes tied with ribbon, each one identical, each one empty until I filled it with sugared almonds. I lined them up on the table like obedient little soldiers. Halfway through, Ethan's tablet buzzed on the couch. I froze. I had never gone through his things, never felt the need to. Trust had always been the foundation of us, solid, unquestioned. The tablet buzzed again. I told myself I was just moving it so it wouldn't distract me. When I picked it up, the screen lit automatically. A message preview. "Mara, did you tell her yet?" My breath caught so sharply it felt like a punch. I stared at the words until they blurred. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the screen, guilt screaming in my ears even as instinct took over. The messages were right there, a long thread, weeks old. I scrolled. Mara, we can't keep pretending forever. Ethan, I know. I just don't know how to do it. Mara, she trusts you. That's the hardest part. Ethan, so do you. Mara, that's different. Different. My chest burned. I felt like I was reading something sacred that had been rotting quietly behind a locked door. There were gaps, days without messages, then bursts of them late at night. Ethan, this is getting complicated. Mara, it was always going to be. Ethan, I never meant to hurt her. Mara, neither did I. But here we are. Here we are. I sank onto the couch, the tablet heavy in my hands. The room tilted slightly, like I was on a boat drifting away from shore. There were no explicit declarations, no I love you, no photos, but there was intimacy in the way they spoke, in the shared understanding, in the secrecy. The worst message, the one that made my vision tunnel, sat near the top. Mara, once it's done, everything will make sense. Ethan, you're sure this is the right way? Mara, it's the only way. My wedding favors slid off the table and scattered across the floor. I didn't remember knocking them over. I sat there for a long time, the tablet dark now, my reflection faintly visible in the glass. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. When the door finally opened, I didn't move. Mara's heels clicked first. Ethan followed, laughing at something she'd said. They stopped short when they saw me. I was still holding the tablet. Mara's eyes flicked to it, then back to my face. For the first time since I'd known her, her smile didn't arrive. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked. I stood slowly. My legs felt weak, but anger held me upright. I said carefully, "you should tell me." Silence. Mara recovered faster than Ethan. She always did. "Tell you what?" she asked lightly, stepping forward. I held up the tablet. "This." Ethan's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, closed it, ran a hand through his hair. Mara sighed. "I told you this might happen." "Told him?" I asked. "You planned this too?" "Don't make it dramatic," she said, though her voice tightened. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." "Like what?" My voice cracked. "Before my wedding?" Ethan stepped toward me. "Lena, please, let me explain." I laughed. A sharp, broken sound. "Explain what? That my sister and my fiance have been having secret conversations behind my back?" Mara crossed her arms. "It wasn't like that." "Oh?" I snapped. "Then what was it like?" She hesitated, just for a second, long enough. Then she said, softly, "I didn't plan to fall in love with him." The words landed like glass shattering inside me. Ethan flinched. "Mara, no," she said, holding up a hand. "It's out now." I looked at her, really looked, at the familiar face that had shared my childhood bedroom, my secrets, my clothes. At the woman who had stood beside me in fitting rooms and held my veil like it was precious. "You're in love with my fiance," I whispered. Mara met my eyes. "Yes." The room seemed to shrink around us. Ethan spoke again, his voice hoarse. "It wasn't supposed to happen. We were just working together so much, and you fell into her," I finished. "Convenient." Mara's expression hardened. "This isn't about convenience. This is about truth." "Truth?" I laughed again, tears burning my eyes. "You lied to my face for months. I protected you," she shot back. "You wouldn't have handled it." There it was, the old narrative, the fragile sister, the capable one. I wiped my cheeks angrily. "So what now?" Mara stepped closer. Her voice dropped, almost gentle. "Now," she said, "we stop pretending." Something in her tone made my skin prickle. "Stop pretending what?" I asked. She smiled. Not the sweet smile. Not the practiced one. A slow, satisfied smile. That this wedding was ever yours. The air went cold. I stared at her, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. "What do you mean?" I whispered. Mara glanced at Ethan, then back at me. "We'll talk about it," she said. "Soon. Soon." She turned and walked out of my apartment like she hadn't just detonated my life. Ethan stood there, torn, reaching for me and then pulling back. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said. I looked at him, this man I'd loved, trusted, planned a future with, and realized something terrifying. I didn't know him anymore. "Get out," I said quietly. He hesitated. "Now," I repeated. When the door closed behind him, I slid down the wall and pressed my forehead to my knees. The sugared almonds crunched beneath my hands, sweet and bitter, all at once. I didn't know how yet. But I knew one thing. Mara wasn't done. And neither was this story. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling fan as it spun uselessly, slicing the air into pieces that never cooled me. Every few seconds, my phone lit up on the nightstand, missed calls, unread messages. Ethan, my mother, Mara. I didn't answer a single one. By morning, my body felt hollow, like something vital had been scooped out and replaced with static. I moved through my apartment in slow motion, stepping over fallen wedding favors, ignoring the smell of coffee I never drank. I showered without feeling the water. I dressed without seeing the clothes. The mirror showed a woman who looked composed enough to fool strangers, but her eyes were different. Alert. Sharp, awake in a way fear creates. Because somewhere between midnight and dawn, grief had hardened into something else. Resolve. I wasn't canceling the rehearsal dinner. Not yet. If Mara thought she could quietly rewrite my life behind closed doors, she was wrong. I needed to see the shape of her plan. I needed to understand how far she'd gone, and who else knew. So when my mother called for the 5th time, I finally answered. "Lena," she said breathlessly. "Thank God. Where are you? Mara says you disappeared." "I'm fine," I said evenly. "What happened?" Her voice dropped. "Ethan came by this morning. He looked terrible." I closed my eyes. "Did he?" "Yes. He said there's been a misunderstanding." I almost laughed. "There hasn't," I said. "But I'll explain later. I'm coming to the rehearsal dinner tonight." There was a pause. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "No," I said. "But I'll be there." I hung up before she could argue. By the time evening arrived, I felt like I was walking into an ambush with my hands visible and my armor hidden underneath my skin. The restaurant Mara had chosen was elegant and warm, all soft lighting and polished wood. The kind of place that felt designed for celebration. Long tables were arranged with name cards and candles. White roses, my flowers, sat in low vases, their scent heavy in the air. Everyone was already there. My parents stood near the bar. Ethan's parents sat stiffly at the table. Friends laughed too loudly, the way people do when tension hums beneath the surface. And at the center of it all, Mara. She wore a deep emerald dress I'd never seen before. It clung to her perfectly, dramatic but tasteful. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. She looked radiant. Too radiant for someone who had just confessed to loving her sister's fiancé. Her eyes locked onto mine the moment I stepped inside. She smiled. A murmur rippled through the room as people noticed me. Conversations faltered, then resumed in awkward bursts. My mother rushed toward me, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a shield. "Oh, honey," she whispered. "We were so worried." "I know," I said. "I'm okay." She pulled back, searching my face. "Where's Ethan?" "Not here," I said, her brows knit together. "But I know." Mara approached us then, graceful as ever. "There you are," she said, as if nothing were wrong. "I was starting to think you'd changed your mind." "I did," I said calmly. "About some things." Her eyes flickered. "Can we talk?" "In front of everyone?" I asked softly. Her lips pressed together. "Later, then." She gestured toward the table. "Sit. We're about to start. Start." The word echoed in my chest. I took my seat at the head of the table, the place marked bride. The card still bore my name in looping calligraphy. I stared at it for a moment, wondering how long it would stay true. The waiter poured wine. Glasses clinked. Someone made a joke about nerves. Laughter rose and fell. Mara stood. "I just want to say a few words," she announced, lifting her glass. My fingers tightened around my napkin. To Lena and Ethan, she continued. "Two people who taught me that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to." A strange hush settled over the table. She turned slightly, just enough to include everyone. "Sometimes love is complicated. Sometimes it asks us to be brave. And sometimes it forces us to choose truth over comfort." My mother stiffened beside me. Mara looked directly at me now, but in the end, love always finds its rightful place. She smiled again. "The same smile to love," she said, glasses lifted hesitantly. I didn't move. The room buzzed with confusion. "Mara," my father said slowly, "what are you talking about?" She lowered her glass. "I think it's time everyone knew." My heart began to pound, not wildly, but steadily, like a drumbeat before a march. "Knew what?" my mother asked. Mara inhaled deeply, savoring the moment. "That plans have changed." A ripple of murmurs swept through the table. "Ethan and I," she began. "No," I said. My voice cut through the room cleanly. Every head turned toward me. Mara paused, surprise flickering across her face. "Lena, you don't get to do this," I said quietly. "Not like this." Her eyes hardened. I was trying to be respectful. "By hijacking my rehearsal dinner?" I asked. Gasps. Whispers. Ethan's mother clutched her purse. My father stood halfway out of his chair. "What is she talking about?" my mother demanded. I rose slowly, my chair scraping softly against the floor. "Mara is in love with Ethan," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos roaring inside me. "And Ethan has been lying to me." The room exploded. "What? This is a joke, right?" Oh my God. My mother stared at Mara like she'd never seen her before. "Is this true?" Mara straightened. "Yes. But, and Ethan?" my father asked. "He isn't here," I said, "because I asked him to leave." Silence crashed down. Mara lifted her chin. "I wasn't going to hide it anymore. You were going to replace me," I said. Her smile returned, slow, deliberate. I was going to correct a mistake. That word, mistake, rang in my ears. My mother let out a broken sound. "How could you do this to your sister?" Mara's eyes didn't leave mine, because she was never meant to marry him. My chest burned. "You don't get to decide that." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I already did." Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not violently, cleanly. I realized then that Mara wasn't improvising. This had always been her stage, and she had one final act planned. I picked up my wine glass and set it down carefully. "You're right about one thing," I said. "This wedding won't happen the way you planned." Her eyes gleamed. "I'm glad you understand." "Oh, I do," I said. "More than you think." Because as I looked around the table, at shocked faces, at shifting loyalties, at my parents' heartbreak, I understood something with absolute clarity. Mara wanted to win. And I was done losing quietly. The morning of my wedding dawned cruelly beautiful. Sunlight spilled through the curtains like nothing in the world had gone wrong. Birds sang. The lake outside the venue lay smooth and innocent, reflecting the sky as if it had no idea what it was about to witness. I stood alone in the bridal suite, wrapped in a silk robe, staring at a dress that no longer felt like mine. The gown hung from a wooden hanger by the window, lace glowing softly in the early light. For months, it had symbolized promise, a future, a life I believed I was building. Now it felt like evidence. There was a knock at the door. I didn't turn. "Come in." My mother entered quietly. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she held herself together the way women of her generation were taught to. Tight spine, trembling hands, pain swallowed whole. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "I know." She hesitated. Everyone's asking if it's still happening. I finally looked at her. "It is." Her breath caught. "Lena, not the way they think," I said. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" That question, "What do you need?" nearly broke me. But I steadied myself. "I need you to trust me," I said, "just for today." She reached out and squeezed my hands. I always have. After she left, the room felt heavier. The air buzzed with anticipation and dread in equal measure. Mara arrived an hour later. Of course she did. She swept into the room like she belonged there, carrying a garment bag I didn't recognize. Her makeup was flawless, her confidence absolute. "You look pale," she observed, glancing at me in the mirror. "Nerves?" I met her gaze. "Something like that." She set the garment bag on the sofa and smiled. "I thought we should talk." "We've done plenty of that," I said. "Not honestly," she replied. She unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress. Not white, ivory, like mine, but sleeker. Less lace. More daring. The kind of dress that didn't whisper romance, it declared intention. My stomach dropped. "You're wearing that?" I asked. She tilted her head. "I was going to change later. After." "After what?" She stepped closer. "After you do the right thing." I laughed quietly. "You really believe this, don't you?" "I believe in clarity," she said, "and inevitability." I turned away. "Get out." Her smile faded for the first time that day. "You can't stop this." "I don't need to," I said. "You already did." Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "you're not as in control as you think." She studied me, searching for something. Fear, maybe. Weakness. She didn't find it. "Fine," she said coolly. "We'll see." When she left, my hands shook, but my resolve didn't. Outside, guests began to arrive. I could hear the low hum of voices, the scrape of chairs, the soft music of the quartet tuning their instruments. Everything proceeding according to plan. Her plan. I stepped into the dress. As my mother and a bridesmaid helped fasten it, I felt the weight of the fabric settle against my skin. The pearls from my grandmother rested at my throat, cool and grounding. This dress had witnessed every fitting, every doubt, every stolen glance. It would witness this too. The coordinator knocked. 5 minutes. I nodded. When the doors opened and the music began, I took my father's arm and stepped forward. The aisle stretched before me, lined with faces, some joyful, some confused, some already whispering. The lake shimmered behind the altar, sunlight dancing on its surface. And there he was. Ethan stood at the front, pale and rigid, eyes darting like a trapped animal. When he saw me, something in his expression shifted, relief maybe, or guilt sharpened into fear. Mara stood nearby, not seated with family, standing, beside him, dressed in ivory. A collective gasp swept through the guests. I didn't slow. I walked. Each step echoed like a countdown. When I reached the altar, I turned to face them both. The officiant looked panicked. Should we wait?" "No," I said clearly. "We're right on time." Mara smiled at the guests. "There's been a change." I looked at her. "Sit down." A hush fell. She laughed softly. "Lena, don't embarrass yourself. Sit," I repeated. For a split second she hesitated. Then she sat. The officiant cleared her throat and began. The words washed over me. Welcome, love, union, phrases that felt hollow now, but necessary. Ritual has power, even when it's broken. When it was time for vows, Ethan swallowed hard. He looked at me, eyes glassy. "Lena, stop," I said. The word landed like a slap. "I need to say something first." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I turned to face everyone, the family, the friends, the witnesses to my unraveling. "I let my sister plan my wedding because I trusted her," I said. "I trusted her with my time, my dreams, and the man I loved." Mara stiffened. "I believed love was protected by honesty," I continued. I was wrong. Ethan took a step toward me. "Please," I raised a hand. "This isn't for you." I turned to Mara. "You smiled at me," I said, my voice steady, "and told me you were helping. You held my dress. You planned my future. And all the while you were rehearsing for this moment." Her lips parted. "You're being dramatic." No, I said softly. I'm being free. I reached up and unfastened my necklace, the pearls slipping into my palm. My grandmother wore these at her wedding, I said. She believed marriage was sacred. I placed the necklace on the altar. This ends today. Gasps. Tears. Silence. I turned to Ethan. I release you. The words felt ceremonial. Final. He broke. I love you. I looked at him, really looked. You loved the version of me who stayed quiet. I stepped back. The officiant whispered, "Do you wish to proceed?" I smiled. Small, genuine, no. Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, chaos erupted. Someone called my name. Someone else shouted. I heard Mara's voice, sharp, furious, cutting through the noise. But I didn't look back. Outside, the sun was warm on my skin. The lake breeze lifted my veil, tugging it loose from my hair. I stopped. And I let it fall. The applause didn't come. That's the strangest thing people don't expect when a wedding collapses in public. There's no dramatic swell of music, no collective gasp that resolves into anything clean. Just sound, fragmented, ugly sound. Chairs scraping, someone crying too loudly. Someone else laughing because they don't know what else to do. I didn't stay to hear it. I walked past the photographer frozen mid-shot, past the coordinator whispering frantically into her headset, past the open doors where sunlight cut the room in half like a blade. My heels sank into the gravel outside, and for a second I nearly stumbled, but then I kicked them off and kept going barefoot. The stones bit into my feet. I welcomed it. Behind me I heard my name once, maybe twice. I didn't turn. Turning would have meant negotiating, explaining, defending myself against people who wanted the mess to be quieter, easier, more comfortable for them. I wasn't interested in comfort anymore. I walked until the sounds of the venue softened, until the lake swallowed the noise. The water lapped gently against the shore, indifferent to human collapse. I stood there in my dress, hem brushing the dirt, breathing like I'd just escaped something alive. Then my phone buzzed. Once. Twice. I ignored it. The third time I answered without looking. "Where are you?" Mara demanded. Her voice, sharp, furious, finally stripped of its sweetness. "I'm exactly where I should be," I said. "You humiliated me." I laughed quietly. "You replaced me at my own wedding." "That was mine," she snapped. "You walked away from it." "No," I corrected. "I walked away from you." Silence crackled between us. "You think you won," she said finally. "I don't think about you at all," I replied, and realized with a jolt that it was true. She exhaled sharply. "You're unbelievable." I learned from the best. I ended the call. My mother found me an hour later. She didn't scold. She didn't plead. She simply sat beside me on the grass and handed me a bottle of water. "I told everyone to leave," she said. "Your father handled the rest." I nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Mara's gone." "Where?" "Somewhere private, I assume," she said carefully. "With Ethan." The name still stung, but not like before. Not like a wound that wouldn't close. More like a bruise I could already feel fading. "I'm sorry," my mother whispered. "For what?" I asked. "For not seeing it sooner." I leaned my head against her shoulder. For the first time that day I cried. Not violently, not theatrically, just quietly. The kind of crying that drains poison instead of adding to it. The days that followed blurred into fallout. Relatives called. Friends texted, some apologized for not noticing. Others wanted details, what really happened. Whose fault was it? Had there been signs? I answered none of those questions. The story didn't belong to them. Ethan came once, unannounced. He stood outside my door for 10 minutes before I opened it. He looked smaller, like a man whose reflection had finally caught up to him. "I made a mistake," he said immediately. "Yes," I agreed. I was confused. "You were comfortable," I said. He flinched. "I loved you," he insisted. "I know. I said gently. But you loved being chosen more. His eyes filled. Is there any chance? No. The word came easily. He nodded, defeated, and left. Mara waited longer. A week passed, then two. When she finally reached out, it wasn't with rage or manipulation. It was with nostalgia. We should talk, she texted. Just us, like old times. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied. There are no old times anymore. She didn't answer. I heard things through the family grapevine. That she'd moved out of her apartment. That she and Ethan tried, briefly, to make something official, only to realize that secrecy doesn't translate well into daylight. That people looked at them differently now. That doors closed more quietly than they expected. Consequences have a way of whispering. One afternoon I opened the wedding binder, the one I'd shoved into a closet like a cursed object, and went through it slowly. The tabs, the notes, the handwriting that had once felt like love. I didn't burn it. I recycled it. Page by page. Symbols matter. But so does disposal. I sold the dress too. Not because I needed the money, but because I refused to let it hang in my life like a ghost. The woman who bought it was kind, newly engaged, glowing. I wished her well. And I meant it. The hardest part wasn't losing my sister or my fiancé. It was losing the version of myself who believed love meant endurance, who believed staying quiet was kindness, who thought being chosen meant being safe. One evening, weeks later, I returned to the lake alone. I wore jeans and a sweater, hair loose, feet bare again. The water looked the same. Calm. Reflective. I watched the sun dip low, staining the surface gold. I thought about the smile Mara had worn when she said it. Your fiancé is marrying me. I finally understood it. It wasn't triumph. It was relief. She'd needed to win because she didn't know how to stand without comparison. I stood up, brushing dirt from my palms, and felt something settle into place. Not bitterness, not revenge. Clarity, the kind that doesn't shout. 3 years passed. Not dramatically. Not in a montage of glow-ups and revenge fantasies. Just quietly. The way real healing happens when no one is watching. I moved to a different city, not to run, but to breathe somewhere my name didn't arrive with footnotes. I changed apartments twice. Jobs once. I learned the geography of a new grocery store, a new morning routine, a new version of myself that didn't flinch when her phone buzzed. I stopped being the bride who walked out. I became just Lena again. Sometimes people still asked, usually after a glass of wine. Weren't you almost married once? Yes, I'd say. And that would be the end of it. I didn't stalk Mara online. I didn't ask for updates. Silence became my boundary. And it held. Until one afternoon it broke. I was home visiting my parents for a long weekend. The house smelled the same, polish, old books, something baked too long in the oven. Comfort layered with memory. I was carrying laundry down to the basement when I heard voices in the living room. One of them was hers. I stopped mid-step, not because my heart raced, it didn't, but because my body wanted confirmation before my mind caught up. Then she laughed. And I knew. She didn't know I was coming. My mother was saying, nervous. It just happened. I walked in anyway. Mara stood by the window, thinner than I remembered, dressed plainly. No emerald, no ivory, just neutral colors that didn't ask to be noticed. She turned when she heard my footsteps. Our eyes met. For a moment, we were children again, two girls sharing a face, a history, a beginning neither of us could undo. Then the moment passed. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. My parents suddenly remembered errands they needed to run. The door closed. Silence filled the room like fog. Mara shifted her weight. You look good. So do you, I said. It wasn't kindness. It was accuracy. She nodded. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. I didn't, I said. But I'm not afraid to anymore. That surprised her. I saw it land. She gestured toward the couch. Can we sit? We can stand, I said. She exhaled slowly. Okay. She stared at the floor for a long time before speaking again. I thought winning would fix something in me, she said finally. I thought if I could prove I was chosen, by him, by everyone, it would quiet this voice I've had my whole life. I said nothing. She looked up. It didn't. Of course it didn't. Ethan and I didn't last, she added quickly, like she needed to say it before I asked. We tried, but everything about us was built on secrecy. Turns out that doesn't age well. I nodded once. I'm not surprised. Her mouth twitched. I am. She swallowed. I wanted to apologize. There it was. The sentence people think in stories. I studied her, the woman who once held my veil and smiled while planning my erasure. I believe you're sorry, I said, but I don't need it. Her eyes widened. You don't? No, I said calmly, because my healing didn't come from you. She blinked hard. I spent years thinking closure meant a conversation, I continued. But closure isn't something someone else hands you. It's something you build when you stop needing answers from people who broke you. Her shoulders sagged, like she'd been holding them up for a long time. I was jealous of you, she whispered. Not because of Ethan. Because you were content. You didn't need to win. You didn't need an audience. And I hated that. I felt a strange tenderness, not for her pain, but for the clarity of the moment. That was never something you could take from me, I said, even when you tried. We stood there, the truth finally aired without performance, without witnesses. She looked at me one last time. Do you forgive me? I thought about it. Forgiveness wasn't a gift. It wasn't a prize for remorse. It was a personal boundary dressed up as grace. I don't carry anger anymore, I said. That's enough. She nodded slowly. I guess it is. When she left, the house felt lighter. That night I went for a walk alone. The neighborhood was quiet. Porch lights glowed softly. Somewhere, someone was practicing piano, halting notes. Imperfect. Human. I passed a small chapel with its doors open. Inside, a wedding rehearsal was underway. A bride stood at the altar laughing nervously. Her sister adjusted her dress with careful hands. For a brief second, the old memory stirred. Then it settled. I kept walking. Because the truth is this, the worst thing my sister ever did wasn't stealing my fiancé. It was showing me, in the cruelest way possible, what I would never tolerate again. She taught me that love without loyalty is theft, that smiles can be weapons, that silence is not peace, and that walking away isn't losing. It's choosing yourself loudly enough that the past can't follow. Somewhere out there, Mara still smiles, but it doesn't belong to me anymore. And that is my happy ending.